Love me some vitamin water. Yummy. You know, as I was writing some of the outlines for this video and the stuff I was going to say and all that, I was slowly starting to realize that, you know, my channel is really just becoming a Taylor Swift extravaganza. I have 3 videos on Taylor Swift. What's funny is I don't even listen to Taylor Swift that often. To be honest, it's relevant to make videos on artists that are relevant, and so that's most of the reason why I'm doing this. I think after this video, there'll be a lot more videos that are not as focused on Taylor, so if you're kind of tired of that content, good news for you. But, yeah, I just wanna state, like, I'm really not that big of a Taylor Swift fan, and you'll never see me, like, with a Taylor Swift poster or anything. That would never— Well, hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of First Impressions, the show where we rate things 24 hours or less after they come out. I'm your host, Irish Porygon, and today we are reviewing Taylor Swift's 1989 Taylor's version. This is a very big release, as everyone has heard. I mean, it was a big release way back in 2014 when it released, and it's an arguably even bigger hit release now. So we're going to jump right into it because college is busy and I have a lot of things to do, so I want to make this video relatively quick to edit. As the usual, keep in mind this is only my first impression, so things are subject to change if I get something totally wrong or miss something. Side note, the Jacksonville Jaguars are doing very, very well, and I'm very happy about that. Anyways, this is Taylor Swift's 5th studio album. Of course, this is a remaster of it, a re-recording, rather. A remaster would be different. But this is her 5th studio album. At the time, she was coming out off of a big hit, Red, her 4th studio album, which was directly after Speak Now, which I reviewed earlier this year. But this was a bit of a shift for Taylor Swift. She has shifted many times in her career, or should I say swifted, ha 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 ha. Anyways, but this album is very clearly inspired by sort of the 80s new wave sort of groups, or synthwave sort of things, by Annie Lennox, the Eurythmics, sort of that kind of style, and I think the shift works pretty well. She does a good job transitioning, better than other artists who try and transition between genres, because it's harder to do than people think. But I think she definitely stays in the pop field. I don't think there's a single Taylor record out there that you could argue is not pop. I mean, in some sense. She has like indie pop records and synth pop records, but they're all sort of that pop, which I think it really helps. It's to her benefit that she stays in that pop vein, because it's what she knows, and you should stick with what you know, but vary it up, which I think she does very well. Also, at the end of this video, I'll be giving a little discussion that's kind of off topic of this album, so stay tuned for that. It's just about Taylor Swift in general and what the modern public outlook on her is. So stay tuned for that. Anyways, I've never listened to this album in full before today, but I did listen to it twice today. I listened to it once at 5 a.m. On my work shift this morning, and I listened to it again during the writing of this video. I think as far as individual tracks go, this is probably one of the strongest Taylor Swift albums as far as that goes. I mean, you have hits that defined what the 2010s were all about, and I don't think anyone can really deny that. I mean, there's 3 singles that were released before this album came out originally, and all 3 of them reached #1 on the Billboard. So, I mean, I don't think you can really deny that this album was not a success in some right. I'm going to try and be kind of brief on the individual track breakdowns, but let's get into it. College is busy and I've got stuff to do. The record opens with Welcome to New York. I mean, this is a song that everyone's heard. Like, it was in Secret Life of Pets, which, I mean, Illumination is the most white bread movie studio of all time, but the fact that they put it in there says that they know what's popular, for better or worse. That's a very debatable statement, actually. We'll ignore that and move on. But Welcome to New York, I mean, it's catchy. You cannot deny that it is a very, very catchy song. I mean, everyone's heard it. Welcome to New York. It's catchy for about a minute, but I honestly think it kind of overstays its welcome. But I kind of respect this song in a way because it's oddly superficial, which is typically used as kind of a detriment to a lot of songs, but I think it honestly kind of works here. Simply because Taylor Swift is an artist that is very known for her in-depth, highly personal lyrical topics, and this one kind of being superficial and a little corny in a good way, I think kind of helps to its benefit. I do think it kind of overstays its welcome, though. There's not enough unique sections of the song to make me incredibly intrigued, and it kind of gets annoying. But, I mean, you can't really deny that it's very catchy, and I think that, in its own right, deserves a bit of a benefit. I also do like the drum part. I think it's a simple drum part, but it's rather unique. It's kind of this driving boom, 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 which you don't really hear in a lot of modern pop songs. It's a lot of, because modern pop songs are a lot of boots and cats, and the bump-a-da-bump-a-da-bump kind of feel is a lot different. I gave this song a C+ personally. I could put it slightly higher. Blank Space. I mean, Blank Space is a very popular single off of this album. It's good. It's honestly, in my opinion, Blank Space is probably the most Taylor Swift song out there, for better or worse. I mean, you hear this song, it is like the definition of what a Taylor Swift song is. There's nothing wrong with it. I didn't really have anything that I could really take a large stab out of it, no major flaws, and it has some very well done satire, to be honest. There's some very kind of almost comedic, satirical lines about her public image in there, and I think it's very genuinely well done, and I gave it a B+. Style, I liked it a lot. I've never listened to the song all the way through, and I'm very sorry that I haven't. It's maybe my favorite introduction to a Taylor Swift song of all time. It's this very unique kind of weirdly compressed guitar part that it's a different flavor that we've never really heard, and I just really like that part. I do, however, one of my main complaints about this song is I find the transition coming out of the first verse into the chorus to be a bit jarring. I mean, that could just be personal, but I do think it doesn't quite nail it. It switches from this kind of guitar-ish feel into synth a little bit too quickly for me, and I don't think it works quite so well. However, they do recover this quickly by having this nice synth pad that kind of ties it all together from that first chorus till the end of the song, and I think it recovers nicely after that slight little misstep. The guitarist on this song, I had to look it up. It actually was not Jack Antonoff, who typically does guitar on a lot of Taylor Swift tracks. It was, I believe it's pronounced Niklas Jungfelt. His guitar playing is quite good. I think there's some unique licks in there. I already talked about the introduction, and I think it works quite well. But yeah, I think the guitar playing here is very strong. There's some nice licks, there's some nice chords, as I talked about in the intro of the song, and I thought it was great. I gave it an A-. Out of the Woods is the first track I didn't like on this album. It's really boring. I just didn't find it interesting. I think it's very repetitive and overly simple. Coming from an artist from Taylor Swift of her caliber, especially on her 5th studio album, it was just kind of a disappointment, and it just felt like it was phoned in. It also kind of sounds like a bit of a rambling story with no, it has kind of fake emotional weight, but I don't think there's anything truly genuine in this song. It's a throwaway. I mean, every album has a throwaway. This album's throwaway. It's gotta have one. It's just kind of a miss, just plain and simple, just a miss. Although it's not unlistenable, you can sit through it and your ears don't explode. But I did get bored. I gave it a D. Didn't like it.
What's up, YouTube? This is your boy Oliver Thrush, and I love Taylor Swift.
Okay.
See you later.
See you, man. All you had to do was say was the next track. It's very intriguing. The drum part, and not particularly the drum part, but the overall drive and style of the song quite honestly reminds me of a Brazilian samba, which is very strange. I know that's a very bold claim to make, considering this is more of a new wave sort of style song, but the overall beat and flow of the song reminds me of a Brazilian samba, because you kind of you have that stutter stop feel, that and it's kind of stutter stop, and it reminds me of that, and it was very unique to me because I've never really heard anything like this out of Taylor until today. It was sort of almost clubbish as well. It was like a mix of that ethnic South American and Euro club. It was very odd, but I think it kind of worked, and it may be a bit of a stretch to call it Brazilian, but that's what I personally got out of it, and art is of course subjective, but I thought it was good. I don't have any real complaints, but at the same time, other than the rhythm, nothing really jumped out at me, and I think in order to have a banger, you do have to have more than just the rhythm jump out. But there's no real complaints there. I gave it a B. It's fine. Shake It Off is such a hard song to rank, because if you were alive in 2014, this song was literally everywhere. It was in every single piece of media, every single event, every single playlist, everywhere for a solid 5 years. This song just did not go away. And so for that reason, it's hard to rank, because there is a certain degree of bias in everybody's mind. If you really like the song, and you never got tired of it, you might give this an A+ because of its longevity. However, if you got annoyed with it quick and hated hearing it every second for of the entire 5-year span, you might give this a very low grade. Anyways, I'm gonna do my best to kind of give it a fair grade, but I am human after all, so there's probably some bias in here. Honestly, it's a good song. I mean, it's good in the sense that Taylor Swift created an earworm and knew exactly what she had and really worked on it. I think it's probably instrumentally the most unique song out of this album, because it strays away from the sort of electronic sound and goes to more, kind of, I wouldn't say acoustic, but it's less electronic in that, right? Because you lean more towards the brass, and you lean into an acoustic drum set. But yeah, I do think it's less electronic in that sense, because you lean away from the synthesizers and more into this almost brass sort of feel, and then you also have the acoustic drum kit rather than an electronic drum machine, which I think kind of, it breaks it up, but you do keep the synthesizers in there, which maintain the overall style of the album, which I think is nice. I think to have a good album, you should have some variation that maintains the sound of the overall album, but also doesn't just bore you to death with the same sound over and over. However, I do find this song to be exceedingly corny. I think that the lyrics are just it's very corny. I think it's kind of aimed more at a younger generation, which I don't know if that was on purpose, but, and this might be that bias of hearing it over and over and over everywhere, but I do think this song is genuinely corny in its lyrics. Specifically, if you don't mind, I know this has been memed to death, but when she says, "Let's get down to this sick beat," and continues the most white bread part of the song ever. White bread in the sense that it's the same thing that the drummer has been doing the rest of the song. I mean, when I hear "Let's get down to this sick beat," I expect some sort of explosion or epic drop or epic change up in the music, and it's just the same thing. Also, I don't know, maybe it's just the way she says it, but it's very corny. And so, this is such a difficult one to rank. I gave it a B-. I don't know. I wish you would. It's very interesting. I like this track. It's intriguing, and the synth bass is interesting. It's kind of this warbly kind of stutter stop sort of feel, where it's doing these like 16th notes sort of feel. The bass is more of a da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da, when the bass in most of these songs is this kind of droning, like kind of whole note sort of feel, but it's 16th notes here, and I think that does help to break up the sound of the album a little bit, because at this point I kind of got tired of the droning synth bass, so it does break it up. It's simple to understand. It's got an interesting syncopation. I wrote B- on here, but honestly I might bump it up to a B. We'll put it in the B- B range. Bad Blood. This is another one. It was a single, #1 on the Billboard, and everyone's heard this song. Everyone and their mother will be able to say who this artist is, or at least say, "Oh yeah, I heard this one in the mall." It's a fun song, and it's a good screamer. Everyone likes a good screamer. It's another hard one to rank, simply because everyone knows this song, and it's played everywhere, and it's hard to tell if one's bias gets in the way of ranking it. I think I'm gonna leave it at a B+, because you can't have a great hit without some underlying skeleton of a good song there, and so I think it at least has that, and likely more. This is probably her most popular song in the album, if not the entire discography, save for Shake It Off. I think Bad Blood and Shake It Off are likely her two most well-known songs. Also, 22 is probably in that mix. Everyone just knows this song, so that makes it hard to rank. But I think Shake It Off is considerably less well executed from a technical standpoint than Bad Blood. I think Bad Blood, lyrically, is just far superior to Shake It Off. I do not like Shake It Off lyrically, and so I think Bad Blood does get a significant edge. And I gave Bad Blood a B+, simply because you can't have a hit song without a good song underneath it. That's actually not true, but Vanilla Ice was a hit, and Vanilla Ice sucks dick. Wildest Dream. Probably my favorite of the quieter songs on this album. I don't really like the quieter songs on this album personally, but this is my favorite one out of all of them by a long shot. It's a bit of a screamer at the chorus, but I would consider it more of one of the quieter songs on the album. I think the chorus in particular works extremely well, and the string section is there. It's not defined. It's not the forefront of the song. It's kind of just this jabbing in the background, sort of this kind of just keeping the rhythm while also present, which kind of adds some dynamicism to the album and the song specifically. And it knows, the string section knows it's not supposed to be at the forefront, and I think it does a really good job at that, which is a nice feature. The ending's a bit abrupt, but other than that, I have no real complaints. It's just kind of little nitpicks here and there. I gave it an A-. How You Get the Girl was also a great song. I was taking notes throughout the duration of this song, simply because when you are getting tips directly from the current face of all women, you kind of tend to take notes. I mean, Taylor Swift is the top gal right now. You tend to take rizzing notes when she's telling you how to rizz up a girl. So that's what I do. We're gonna ignore that. That's kind of a really sad tangent and makes me seem like a loser. We're gonna ignore that. In all seriousness, it's a good song. Everything works. I don't have a problem with it. Gave it an A-. I like it a lot. It takes a lot to get an A out of me, I will say that. A-. I like it a lot. This Love, a little boring, not even gonna lie. I didn't find it particularly unique, and it dragged. I just think it dragged. It had a little bit too much blank space in between the lyrics and the parts where she was singing. And I found the blank space to be a little bit draggy and kind of made the song feel longer than it was. Ultimately, it's not super unique to me, and it ends up falling into irrelevancy. So, it overstays its welcome a little bit. It goes on a bit too long, but that could be the general draggy feeling of it. I gave it a C-, sorry. I Know Places has a unique little drum groove, which I like. I'm discovering that this album, once you really get into it, had some more unique drum parts than I thought there might be. Although for the most part, the instrumentals are far simpler than on other Taylor Swift albums, specifically the ones that came before it. And I think the drum parts are a highlight in this album because I think they're more complex than people give them credit for. Not particularly complex, I would say, but more unique. On this song, the drum's unique, like I was just saying. It's fine, as far as the whole song goes, as a song as a whole. I have no, real complaints, but unfortunately also no really unique things to say besides that drum part. Besides the intro, which I did like, but I feel like even that isn't particularly masterful. I gave it a B-. As far as clean goes, the intro, honestly, sounds like an Apple ringtone. That was my first thought when I was listening to this. There's some cool metaphorical devices going into this, which makes the little lyricist inside me very happy. But overall, it just kind of falls into the safe music category for me. It has the cool little metaphors to kind of make you go, ooh, 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 pique your interest at the song. But in between those little golden points, there's not a ton. It just kind of exists. However, I will give it the step up over I Know Places, but still give it the same grade. It's not a huge step up, and I'm going to give it a B- again. Wonderland had some cool metaphors, and I appreciate the lyricism in this song a lot, much like the previous song, Clean. I just think the songwriting, as far as the technical and instrumental bits, is a bit held back. There's a lot of blank space, ha ha ha, between phrases, and it just feels a little blank, ha 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 ha. It's great lyrically, the track isn't bad, it's just a couple noticeable flaws. I gave it a B. The next track is You Are in Love. I found it to be very, 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 very basic. It's not at all what we know Taylor's standards to be. We know Taylor is a fantastic songwriter and can make great lyrical masterpieces, but this is not at all that. At the end of the day, this is a deluxe edition track, so we know it was cut from the original release of this song back in 2014, so it does make sense why it's not quite at the same level, but I still don't think that's really quite excusable if it's on a release. It's just kind of like one motif. It goes over the same chords the whole time. There's not really much shifting. It's on this one idea and refuses to branch out. It's just this very basic, bare bones vocal rhythm as well. I think one of the cool things about Taylor's singing style is it's these very unique syncopations. Like, she doesn't really quite sing in the same rhythms that we're used to. She has like this tumbling sort of, the way she sings, like ba-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da is like one example of that. But this whole the rhythm to this song is literally just eighth notes. It's just da 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 da, and it's very, very boring to listen to. I would have liked to see just some variation in that, because just hearing eighth notes for 3 minutes long is not very interesting to me. It's not unlistenable. I don't feel physical pain listening to it, so I'm not going to give it an F, because I don't think it's quite deserving of an F. I'm just going to give it a D and call it a day. Move on. New Romantics was honestly a ton of fun, and I'm not honestly sure why I didn't make the original album cut and got shunted to the deluxe edition. It's loud and would fit in perfectly with the first 3-4 tracks in this album if you moved it up somewhere around there. It's just a head bopper, and a head bopper is always a good song in my book, because if your head is moving, it clearly means you're enjoying the music. It's similar to Welcome to New York in the sense that it's more fun than deep, which I think is something we don't see enough of on Taylor tracks. They all kind of tend to be, a lot of them tend to be very deep, and it's fun to have a superficial track every once in a while, as long as it doesn't dominate the album, in my opinion. It just gives variation to the song. It's pretty cool. And you gotta love the ah-ah-ah-ah-ahs. She has like this really cool like vocal hook that is kind of the staple of the song. I can't remember quite how it goes at the moment, but she has this vocalization that plays at the end of, I think, the verses, and it's very nice. My only nitpick is I think a key shift up, a note or two, might have helped, because she wasn't hitting the top of her range, which is fine, but the problem was the lower part of the range. It felt like it was a bit forced, a bit like too rich compared to the rest of the notes she was singing, and it just didn't feel quite right. But that's honestly just speculation. So I'm gonna have to give this song an A. I very much enjoyed New Romantics, and it might be my favorite on the album. Alright, now we're getting into the vaulted tracks. These are tracks that did not make it onto the original album or the original deluxe release. So, here is the vaulted tracks. The first one is simply called Slut, and like everyone else, I mean, I was very interested to hear what this song was about, because I mean, you see a song named Slut, you're gonna be curious, you know? My roommate's recording me saying all this, so now he has blackmail material. It's a very interesting title, which just piqued everyone's interest. I mean, I'm not repeating that actually. I think this is the best quiet song on the album, because it's not a loud song. It's a very slow, methodical, built-up song. I'm just curious why it was vaulted, because it's very good. It might have had something to do with public image at the time, because I know the subjects that Taylor Swift was known for talking about in her branding were different back in this time. So I think that's the most likely reason, but I do think this is a very, very good song. It has some very, very solid metaphors. The solid metaphors were honestly, they rival some of the greatest in songwriting history, in my opinion. I think there were some fantabulous lines and one-liners in this song, and I think she really does a good job of emphasizing those metaphors and does a fantastic job with that. It's just great lyric-wise, it's great. She takes a great stab at mainline media in this song, and all the different ways they portrayed her that are made negative, or a libel, or slander, or untrue, or just rude to report on, and invasion of privacy, just all those different things that celebrities get kind of railed for. She talks about all of that, and I think it's in a really, really powerful way. I gave this one an A. I loved this track, and I thought it was amazing. Say Don't Go. I don't like the intro on this track. I don't think it's quite good. It's too low for me as far as Taylor's register for me to be able to appreciate. It just doesn't feel quite right. She doesn't feel quite comfortable singing it. It might be a creative choice. I got the edge that it might be something to do with that, but I don't think it was clear. But I don't think it was clear enough for that to come across fully. It's bold of me to attack the creative choices of Taylor Swift, obviously one of the premier songwriters of our generation, but maybe that's just me. It's entirely possible. Taylor, keep doing what you're doing. You're doing great. Anyways. And I'm gonna say that intro does just mar the song for me, ultimately. And the song is just ultimately just a touch long for me. I think it goes on a bit too long. Overstays its welcome, just like my cock. I gave it a C+ for cock plus. Next song, Now That We Don't Talk. This one also sits a bit lower in a register, which again causes a poor entrance to the song. I just think there's a streak here, like 3 songs in a row, that just sit too low in a register for the intro. And I think it's to its detriment. However, there is some strong instrumentals in this song, especially in the low end of the frequency. I really liked the bass and kind of midsy parts of the mix. I think they propped and are very strong. It's also curious that Taylor decided to make the creative choice to go with an acoustic kit on this song, especially when drum machines are so prominently featured throughout the album. But I think it really works here. It brings some variety to an album that kind of needs variety. Variety is a little bit of a sore spot for this album, and I think she does a good job by making that creative decision. I think it's fun, provides some variety, but ultimately it just falls a little bit flat, just for me. It's not quite as strong as other things on this list, and I think that'll make it take a dive bomb in the ratings. So I gave it a B-. I might decide to rank it higher on a future day. I could totally see that. Suburban Legends. This one's borders, I think. Suburban Legends. So in this song, I think she finds this perfect line to straddle, which she struggled to find for the last couple tracks on this album. But it borders right between her perfect range, her golden range, kind of in that lower section, and a little too low. She finds this perfect line, and I think she hits it perfectly, and it's a great creative choice because it adds a little bit of huskiness and some pain to her voice without sounding uncomfortable like she's stretching to reach it. And I think it does a better job in the previous 3 tracks, which I did remark that is a problem for the tracks. There's some really cool building throughout the first minute that I really like, and there's some cool things with pitch bends on the synth, which there's just some very different choices, and I think that's really cool. I think it's fun and a decent, strong entry on the album. It's a very intriguing track, but I understand why it might have been vaulted. So I gave it a B. Is It Over Now starts off really intriguing. There's this really weird, crow call sound effect. It's like this high-pitched kind of shriek that repeats, and it comes in every other measure from what I could tell on the 3rd beat of the measure. But it's very intriguing because it's like this ah sound. It's very odd. And so I heard that and I was like, this is weird. I wonder where it's going. And I was intrigued. However, it overstays its welcome. It stays for half the song and comes back and goes out a couple times, and it just doesn't. It's distracting, and it gets corny and unnecessary, and it kind of bothered me as the song went on. Taylor's trying to pour her heart out in the lyrics with these meaningful words that mean a lot to her, and then every once in a while you just hear ah, and it's that doesn't help. That doesn't help me get the message of the song at all. I feel like it was an interesting choice, but I just couldn't take it seriously in the end. And it really affected the way I heard the song. It's just a serious flaw that really dunks it, and I'm gonna have to give it a C because I just can't take the song seriously, and I think that is a big problem. If you want people to take your song seriously, and I just can't do that. Finally, here's the Kendrick feature. So, oh my gosh. Taylor Swift has had some really great features, and artist features, on her previous Taylor's Version records. Last album, Speak Now, she had this fantastic, soulful Hayley Williams duet, which is a nice power ballad, and she also had a feature with Fall Out Boy, which I personally did not really like, but I heard other people found it to be quite good. And then there's only one feature on this album, and it's not even an original song. It's this weird Kendrick feature where he just raps over sections of Bad Blood, which I don't even think is its own recorded version. I think it's just a remix. And I know people put remixes on their album a lot, but I was expecting something a little more from someone of Taylor's caliber. However, I think Kendrick does a good job with what he's given. I think the styles of the artists are blended rather well, and there's good transitions between the sample and the rapping. I think that it's very clean. A lot of times it can be jarring on songs like this, but I think it's clean and feels defined. I feel like Kendrick really respects Taylor's style here and doesn't want to step on her toes. And he just gives reverence to the track, and I think that's very respectful of him. However, I do have to say Kendrick's lyrics are extremely generic. They don't really cover any bases while also covering all the bases, and just feel rather weak as a result of that. However, I do think the songs do mesh rather well. And they don't overshadow each other. They each have their distinct sections, which I think was probably the best creative choice they could have gone with there. At some point, however, Kendrick just disappears from the record. It's a feature of Kendrick Lamar on a remix of a previous track, and I would expect it to be different, but about 2/3 of the way through the record, through the track, he just vanishes and does not say a single other word. And it's very confusing to me, and just kind of left me feeling disappointed. But it's a fun listen. There's just some serious execution problems, but I do think it is fun. So, and Bad Blood's a good song. I had trouble ranking this one. I gave it a B, but that might go lower. To be honest, I don't know. Alright, overall, as far as the original, I think the original 1989 is a fantastic album. I think the loud or exciting songs in particular are smash hits. Songs like Welcome to New York, Style, Bad Blood, that's that vein. They're all just good screamers, or just fun songs, the louder ones. It proves your music doesn't have to be complex to be good, which is something I feel like I forget personally a lot. Sometimes I think a music must have complexity. And it does to a degree, but sometimes I go overboard with that, and it's good to be reminded that simple songs can work. The 80s synth style with Taylor's lyrics creates this weird like complexity, because it's like this 80s style, this very much dated synth sounds that are refreshed and brought anew and helped with a new set of lyrics from a new artist. And it's this very interesting, complex sort of thing that we don't really hear in other places to this particular executionary style. It just helps with the originality. However, I think there's a weakness on the album, a very core weakness, and I think it's that the quieter songs are, I think, worse than Taylor's usual standard. I don't find the quiet songs to be particularly fantastic. I just think they're kind of eh. Another plague to this album is that the exciting songs, or in my opinion, most of the songs that are better, are in the first half of the album. And I think it's important to know what songs are good when you spread out an album and make sure that you have bangers spread throughout so people keep listening for the next banger on the album. And unfortunately, the back half of the album being noticeably weaker than the first half, I think really affects its longevity as far as how people will listen to it. Obviously, that does not ring true for the singles, as the singles have stayed in popular culture for years, but I have noticed that the album itself, like, you don't want to sit through and listen to the whole thing because the back half is worse. I will say this album does also get a bit samey at times. There's not a ton of variation as far as style, although for occasionally they do. Like songs like Style, I talked about, have a very original twist on them, which really breaks it up a little bit. However, these songs ultimately end up kind of melding back into the style a little bit harder than I'd like them to. And it gets a little samey. It's a bit difficult to listen to the entire record for these reasons. So I think it's a great compilation of singles, but as an album, it doesn't mesh quite together as well. I also want to talk compared to Speak Now, which was the most recent Taylor's version, as I've discussed, which is it's a Taylor record I'm more familiar with. I reviewed this one a couple weeks ago, I don't know. But I think the highlights stand out more than the lowlights. On Speak Now, the highlights really just steal the show on that album. The lowlights are kind of, you don't really remember them because they're just kind of mid. However, I feel like while the highs on this album are higher than the highs on Speak Now, I feel like the lows are lower, and so it balances out to the same grade. But it's important to note that it's a different type of album, because when you have higher highs and higher lows, you remember it all, but for different reasons. And I don't think it's necessarily better, and I don't think it's necessarily worse. I do think the vaulted tracks do kind of solve this issue a little bit, but not totally. They do help, though. I gotta say, with the Taylor's version, I'm a little disappointed. I feel like there's not any changes made at all. And before you go all feral on me, I do realize that that's kind of the point. But at the same time, like, being an artist and someone who is a fond creator of film and video and stuff, I often will go back to my old videos and projects and go back and go, I could have done this better, I could have done this better, why didn't I do that, blah, 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 blah. And I know every artist in the entire world does that. They listen to their old songs, they look at their old paintings, they look at it, whatever, and they go, I should have done this better, I should have done this better, I should have done this better. And I think Taylor just refused to take that opportunity this time. I think there are some songs that should remain largely unchanged, but I think a little touch-up here and there might have been nice, and I really didn't hear anything. And the album sounds nearly identical to the original, and it's rather disappointing to me. I do recognize that the point of the album is not to remaster it, and the point of the album is to just re-record it so that Taylor has access to the masters. However, I still think that's not really an excuse for the lack of innovation you see here. I just feel like, from a business perspective, I respect it, because Taylor is maybe the best in the business at making money off of her songs. She's very, very, very good at the legal side of things, and reclaiming stuff as her own and making money off it, and I respect that. I respect that she is taking her art and making money off it, but what I don't respect is from the artist's perspective. I think that most artists would agree that art is ever-changing and should ever be striven to improve a project if you are an artist, and she doesn't really strive to improve this album. I genuinely don't think so, and I think that really detracts it. You could argue the vault tracks were, but I think it needs more than that. I think I expected a little bit more. And yeah,
The original songs are great. Some of the songs are complete bangers, but I still think that even you can improve weak spots in everything. I try to improve weak spots in everything. I think that that's an important part of making music, and I don't think she executes that here. Another disappointment is I was really excited for a feature, like an artist feature, like the Hayley Williams track that I talked about earlier in the video. But there's not really any unique features. The only thing we got is there's one track that is the Kendrick remix, and it's not even an original song. It is a song Taylor already wrote years ago, and Kendrick just raps over it. That's not really an original song or a feature that I was really looking for, and it's disappointing to me. What's even more of an odd decision is that the only artist feature on the track isn't even on the standard edition of the album. It's only on the deluxe. It doesn't make any sense to me, and I'm trying to understand why. Here are the grades, whatever they are, floating around my head. Let's see what my average was. I mathed it out into a GPA calculator, giving all these grades into a little calculator and seeing what comes out. And I got a GPA between a B- and a B, closer to a B. As you can see, the songs I really didn't like and the songs I really did like canceled out and gave me kind of that average grade I was expecting. I want to make it clear that I don't really sum albums up in a single letter, and I think the discussion leading up to the letter is more important than the letter I give it itself. So please, listen to the discussion I gave it more than the letter I gave it. There's some great songs in this album, there really are. But there are also some songs I just don't think are good, and they really mar the track. They mar the art as a whole. And so I think for the Taylor's version rating, I'm gonna have to drop it. I think the original gets a B or a B-. I think I'm gonna give it a B. So I'm gonna have to give the Taylor's version a C+, just because it's disappointing, and I'm gonna stick with that verdict. This may be a bit harsh, but please remember that the name of this series is First Impressions, not definitive scores. This is subject to change in the future, and it probably will be. I'm just ultimately disappointed by the lack of innovation, and it's near identical to the original release, and the lack of solid artist feature, and the only artist feature is one that isn't even an original song. It just was all contributed to a disappointment and a letdown in my book. It's just the Taylor's version that's a disappointment. The original is a B. Taylor's version is C+. Enough said. And yeah, please let me know if you agree. Please let me know if there's anything I'm missing, because I might not know all the background of this track. I know there's a lot of lore and whatever, and blah, 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 blah. So please let me know all of that. There's something else I want to talk about. Even though I just delivered my final verdict, I want to talk about a big question that I've been thinking about a lot recently, which is, why do people love to hate Taylor Swift? Why is there such a big movement of people that just love to hate on Taylor Swift and her fans? Why is that so? You go on TikTok, you see people making fun of Taylor Swift fans for one reason or another, and you're allowed to have your own opinion, like say whatever you want, but I'm just curious why, and I'm trying to investigate it. As a former Taylor Swift hater myself, I have experience in that field, but I think I'm reformed now to the point where I can deliver a fair opinion on her. I just want to kind of investigate the question and see what happens. So, I need a little context for this discussion. I need to tell you all about bell curves. I'll give you the very, very simplified explanation. A bell curve is a curve that looks kind of like, I'm just going to draw it on the screen. It's this. This is a bell curve. What does it mean? Let me tell you. If you divide the bell curve into 5 equal sections, that large hump shows that there are many people. It is the moderate view on Taylor Swift that she is an artist, that she makes music, that she does these things, and they don't care. The vast majority of people don't care. They don't give a hoot about Taylor Swift. Why? Because the group that hates Taylor Swift and the group that will give their right nutsack for Taylor Swift are on the edges of that little section. As you can see, there's not as many of them. But why do we hear about them a lot? Well, that's something called a vocal minority. Vocal minorities are louder than majorities. Why? The majority doesn't care. Why would the majority talk about Taylor Swift if they genuinely don't care? The answer is they won't. That's why you have vocal minorities, the haters and the lovers of Taylor Swift. These are the groups that feud. These are the groups that cry at her concerts on one end, and they go to everything and they stan her and they will kill you if you don't like her. On the other end, you have all the guys that think they're cool because they like to make fun of Taylor Swift and her fans and demean people and blah 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 blah. The sections in the middle in between these are just the normal fans and the normal dislikers. These are the people on one end that go, yeah, I don't really like Taylor Swift. On the other end, that go, I like Taylor Swift, she's good. And if you fall into one of these categories, you are less likely to be opinionated. but you have an opinion, and that is notable. As you can see, there's a medium amount of these people, but why don't we hear about them so much? Because they're not a vocal minority. They are a semi-vocal, opinionated people. I don't know. So it's important to note that the vast majority of people are not Taylor Swift haters. It's just the vocal minority. That is my point there. Okay, let's talk a little bit more. What's curious about people hating on Taylor Swift is other fan bases of anything do the same thing. I am an NFL fan. I support the Jacksonville Jaguars. Go Jags, go Trevor Lawrence. Wait, that's not... Go Jags, go Trevor Lawrence. You can't see it, I don't care. I do the same thing that Taylor Swift fans do for my Jacksonville Jaguars. I jump off the couch when they score a touchdown. I get very upset when they lose in the playoffs to the Kansas City Chiefs. I do all these different things, and you have to realize that I do the same thing about my NFL teams that the Taylor Swift fans do about their Taylor Swift. We jump up, we get excited, we get sad, we blah 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 blah. Everybody has a thing they do that about. People do that about their favorite movies. People do that about their favorite artists. People do that about their favorite sports teams. People do that about whatever the hell they want to. And it's clear that Taylor Swift fans get hated on for the same thing that other fan bases do, and so I'm curious why that happens. Why has it happen? Here's another thing to note. Beatlemania and MJ. What do they have in common? They were the biggest thing in the world at the time of their popularity. MJ, worldwide sensation. Beatles, worldwide sensation in the Western world, but that's irrelevant. Well, if we look at the careers of Taylor Swift, MJ, and the Beatles, what do they have in common? Taylor Swift is popular and young. MJ was popular and young. The Beatles were popular and young. They all made music. They all made music that was popular at the time. What is the difference between the Beatles and MJ, who don't get that much hate, and Taylor Swift? I think there's two main things. One, recency bias. And two, it's fairly obvious, and it's a bold statement to make, but gender. Taylor Swift is a woman. Does that make a difference? I think it does. I think it's a bold statement to make, and it is often a turn off to anyone who's listening to your opinion, but I'm just going to say it because I'm going to defend it. I think that part of the reason people hate Taylor Swift is because she is a woman. The point is that yes, Taylor Swift being a woman does have an impact on her hatred, and the other part of it is recency bias. I don't think it's all misogyny, I think part of it is recency bias. The fact is that people enjoy hating things that are mainstream. It is fun for them. It has been fun for me. It has been fun for you at some point. We all have this thing called recency bias where we like to hate things that are new. And I think that's a big factor. But yeah, my point is recency bias and misogyny are part of the problem. You can't blame either one without blaming the other. One good news piece about this whole problem is that I have noticed that as the Taylor Swift avid haters start to grow up and get out of high school, they start to kind of mellow out and realize, yeah, there's not really a point in hating Taylor Swift. Which is good, because it means people will age out of it. I wasn't concerned about it, but it's just kind of something you have to deal with until they grow up. But these high schoolers, these Taylor Swift haters, one of the things they love to bring up, which I want to comment on, is Kanye started his career. She wouldn't be where she is today without Kanye. And my response to that is always like, that whole Kanye incident is 10 years old. It's irrelevant what happened 10 years ago. That is outdated information. Taylor Swift has moved on from that so many years ago. Why do you care so much if Kanye started her career? Maybe he did. Maybe he boosted her into stardom and gave her the push she needed. Who cares? That's irrelevant information. They act like that's their trump card, and it doesn't make any damn sense. Why do you care if Kanye started a career? She's on her career right now. We are well past this. It just doesn't make any sense. Also, Taylor Swift was already 3 albums into her career by the time Kanye made that comment that put her into the public spotlight even more. It just doesn't make any logical sense why people think this is such a good argument. Anyways, that's irrelevant to this whole album review, but I just wanted to talk about that for a second because it's just something I think is important to recognize. That, like, yeah, people are jerks, but also, like, people have always been jerks. And it's kind of just something we have to deal with. Anyways, that's going to be about it for Taylor Swift. I do want to say, would the NFL please respectfully stop cutting to Taylor Swift at the end of every Travis Kelce touchdown? I just want to see my highlights and stats numbers and nerd out over the numbers. I don't want to see Taylor Swift at every single football game. It's like you bite into a sandwich and you get a piece of chocolate. Like, piece of chocolate is good, but I don't want it in my sandwich. That's all I want to say. Take Taylor Swift out of the NFL games. Thanks for watching. See ya.